Greetings and welcome to AWHONN Insights, the home for candid nursing conversations. Today we're discussing a topic that has global implications: human trafficking. Every year, millions of adults and children are trafficked worldwide, including here in the U.S. It's happening in many communities, and victims can be any age, race, gender, or nationality. Our special guest is Dr. Francine Bono-Neri, a pediatric nurse practitioner, educator, researcher, and published author. She's the co-founder and president of Nurses United Against Human Trafficking, a global association dedicated to combating human trafficking by educating, equipping, and empowering healthcare professionals on anti-trafficking measures. I'm your host, Bria Anopise, and I'm joined by co-host Jessica Irubali, Director of Collaborative Programs at AWHONN. Jessica, the podcast is now all yours.
Thank you, Bria, and thank you, listeners, for joining us. I'm super excited to have Fran here as our guest, and I'm hoping that she's going to illuminate us with all things surrounding human trafficking. Welcome, Fran. So the first thing I kind of wanted to know is what brought you to this area of nursing. One, thank you for all the work that you've done and all the conferences you've done. I know I got to see you at the AWHONN conference and it was just wonderful, but what brought you to this area?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It truly is an honor and pleasure. And I thank you immensely, both of you, that you are allowing this platform for this dissemination of this critical content, because it is happening literally right under our noses. And as healthcare professionals, we are missing it. And so on that note, I will recount exactly what happened with me and how I entered the anti-trafficking space. I've been a nurse now at this point for 32 years. That number always shocks me and it gets larger every time I say it, it seems. So I have been an academic nurse educator now for about close to 10 years. And so this was in the fall semester of 2018. As a clinical instructor at the time, and as a pediatric nurse practitioner, I would take my nursing students who were going through their pediatric didactic courses into the clinical setting for those pediatric rotations and clinical experiences. At the time, I was in New York, and we had gone to this level 1 trauma center teaching hospital, and we had received a call from the emergency department saying that there was a 16-year-old who needed to be admitted, significant cellulitis requiring admission for IV antibiotic therapy and hydration. And so I assigned one of my students to take this patient. There were a few other students who were not busy, so this was a wonderful opportunity to really see the admission process and all that is entailed with that. As a clinical instructor who really likes to be involved with the students and the clinical experience, I had gone in with these 3 students to assist with the admission. It's always very difficult to recount this. I walked in and I could not believe the condition of the 16-year-old. She had lice, was malnourished, very poor hygiene, covered, I'm talking covered, head to toe, IV drug marks, self-inflicted cut marks, history of sexually transmitted infections, positive UTI, positive urine for various illicit substances, and the cellulitis was so significant, she was borderline septic. And I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, she's 16. How did she get like this? I mean, how does this happen? So there was, unbeknownst to me, this gentleman who was sitting in the room that I happened to notice then, and I walked over to him, very professional, introduced myself, and I'm looking at him. He's twice her age, and he was the complete opposite of how she was. Like it was as though I had a dichotomy in this room. And he's well dressed, clean cut, well spoken, and I'm thinking, who is this person? I knew that there was no familial relationship, and so very professionally, I went over to him and I said, "Excuse me, sir, if you could please just tell me who you are." Of course, as I said, I introduced myself. We're taking the admission history, and so just to know who you are and your relationship with this patient. And he says, "Yeah," he says, "I'm just a friend, and I'm really concerned about her. I care about her, and I'm worried about her well-being." And I'm thinking, right. I mean, of course, I was completely professional, but I knew he was lying. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. Fast forward to June of 2019. At the time, I was serving on the board of directors for the American Nurses Association for the state of New York. And so we were in DC for Membership Assembly ANA National, who is now my dear colleague and co-founder, Ms. Tammy Tony Butler. She was selected to present at Membership Assembly, and so she presents on human trafficking. Now, again, please mind you, I had been a nurse at this point for about 28 years. And she's going on about the red flag findings and the signs and symptoms and the clinical presentations. Colleagues, it was though I was hit by a Mack truck in the middle of Membership Assembly, because it was as though she was doing a case study on this 16-year-old. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how did I not know? How did none of us know? And because she's 16, and based on the federal definition, according to the TVPA, which I will speak to in a minute, anyone under the age of 18 involved in a commercial sex act, it's human trafficking, it's a crime, and it falls under mandatory reporting guidelines. So every single one of us failed as a mandated reporter. I was so overwhelmed. After a few minutes of her presentation being over, I was able to stand up, went outside just to get a breath of fresh air, ended up walking back into the lobby, and I very fortuitously ran into her. And I stopped her and I said, "Please, I need to speak to you because I literally was hit by an 18-wheeler during your presentation." And so she says, "Yes, of course. What is it?" I said, "I just need to recount to you the details of this encounter." And so essentially I told her everything that I just spoke of. And she looked at me, I'll never forget it. She looked at me so matter-of-factly and she said she absolutely was being trafficked and her trafficker was sitting right there. I handed her my business card. I said, "Please, I don't know how to help you, but please let me help you." Mm-hmm. And that literally was the birth of Nurses United Against Human Trafficking, because I swore I would do everything in my power to prevent another healthcare professional from missing a victim of human trafficking. And Tammy, who again is at this point a very dear friend of mine, she not only is a forensic nurse examiner, sexual assault nurse examiner, subject matter expert on human trafficking, she is also a survivor. She experienced familial sex trafficking in which her mother was her trafficker. And so at this point, I am fairly well versed on human trafficking. I essentially, like I said, joined the anti-trafficking space as of June of 2019 and have remained here ever since.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm a little teared up, and so I apologize. But I feel also some of us are ill-equipped to identify. So I thank you for your work. And although I didn't want you to have that experience, I appreciate that you're in the space. And one of the things is we see human trafficking signs everywhere. Like if you identify anybody, call this number. If you know of anything, call this number. And I was walking with my mom somewhere and she was like, "Mika," she's like, "what is domestic trafficking?" Like she didn't understand, like people in our lay people or in people that are hearing, I don't know if they understand, like there's different types of trafficking. Can you enlighten us about the different definitions?
100%. And I will definitely just come out there and say that I agree with you. As much as I appreciate the awareness signs, those campaigns, 100%, because even if one is identified, that's one victim who could possibly exit the life and receive resources. So on the other hand, people don't know what trafficking is. And so I thank you for this opportunity to really get into its definition. And so people understand what it is. There are a lot of myths. There are a lot of misnomers. And so just to clarify, and I always like to refer to the TVPA to go into the definition. And the TVPA is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act that was signed, I believe it was signed into law October 28th of 2000. So according to the TVPA, human trafficking is defined as sex trafficking in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained 18 years of age. And that is something that I specifically spoke to. It is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjection to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Having said that, let's speak very candidly. Human trafficking is a global crisis. It is a public health crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis. It is happening in every state, in just about every community, although I would venture to say in every community. I just can't prove that. Mm-hmm. It is a very hidden crime. These victims, or survivors, as I like to refer to them also, victim is really a law enforcement term that is being used, that is for someone who is actively in the life. But I refer to them as survivors as well, because they are doing whatever they can to get through another minute in this life that they are living. So it is happening everywhere, but it is such a hidden crime. These victims / survivors are psychologically manipulated. What every single one of them shares is a vulnerability. There is no prejudice, no bias as to who gets recruited into the life. It is not based on the color of your skin, the socioeconomic status that you are in. It is not based on race, culture, neighborhood, car you drive, anything like that. All that needs to be present is a vulnerability that can be exploited. And every single one of us has a vulnerability. For some, it may be finances. For some, it may be a substance use addiction. And that trafficker will then hold that substance abuse addiction over that person and say, listen, you go do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll give you your fix. It is as simple as wanting to be loved, accepted, low self-esteem, that someone comes along and says, you're beautiful and I love you. It can be that simplistic. It is sex trafficking, which really is very prevalent in the news. People are, for the most part, aware of it because it's in the social media outlets, the news outlets. But there is labor trafficking, which occurs in the agricultural industry, crabbing industry, factories, restaurants, healthcare. We have healthcare professionals that are being labor trafficked. There's domestic servitude. There is child soldiering. There are many forms. There's also organ trafficking. In fact, one of the statistics that is out there that is the most reliable is that about 10% of organs that are used in transplants, and I'm not talking some sort of sweatshop, put together where these patients are receiving these organs, but in hospitals, about 10% are actually obtained through organ trafficking. And we have to look at those push-pull factors with supply and demand. So there are many forms of trafficking. There is no movement necessary for someone to be a victim of human trafficking. They can be trafficked out of their own home. In fact, 40 to 50% of children who are trafficked right out of their own home by a family member, mother, father, grandfather, sibling, grandparents. I mean, we've seen it all. What trafficking is not is smuggling. A lot of people think that these terms are interchangeable, and they are not. Human smuggling is the voluntary wish to evade those border laws that are in place. So it is a crime against the borders of a country in which someone comes in and is evading those laws. It is a crime against a country, as opposed to human trafficking, which is an exploitation-based crime against a person. So these two terms are not interchangeable, and that's something that a lot of people are misunderstanding. And again, the word trafficking, because it has the word traffic in it, people associate it with movement. That is a misnomer. And just as I said, there are people who are literally being trafficked out of their own home. And when we look at human trafficking today, the ILO, I believe in 2022, the statistic that is estimated, because again, it is such a hidden crime, these numbers are underrepresented and underreported. They're saying that there are about 50 million people globally who find themselves in this life of trafficking. That is an exponential number of people. And there have been values that have been thrown out. I think the most recent was prior to the one that just came out in March. It was $150 billion a year gross annual income globally of human trafficking. This is all tax-free money off of the profits of a human being who's being sold. The most recent value now just came out by NASDAQ and Verifin in 2024, March of 2024, that they are estimating that human trafficking grosses globally about $350 billion a year. That is roughly equivalent to Google, Nike, and Starbucks combined. And again, this is all profit off of the sale of the human product. Unlike a drug that is smoked once, injected, etc., an illicit arms trade that once that ammunition, gun, whatever is gone, it's gone. But a human being can be sold over and over and over again. It is not like the movie Taken. It is not like Sound of Freedom. And as much as I appreciate those films because it really did raise awareness, that is not what is happening domestically. It is psychological manipulation. It is not the white van. In fact, it is our devices, technology. Ever since COVID, we had those shutdowns. People maintained work. Students maintained academic progression. Everybody transitioned to online continuity of living. And unfortunately, we've really stayed there. And I say unfortunately because traffickers, it's Darwin's survival of the fittest, they recognize now that they have an infinite number of victims literally at their fingertips that they can groom and recruit and manipulate. There are no geographic boundaries. You can order sex as easily online as you order something, a pizza, let's say, from one of those delivery companies.
I don't even know how to respond, except that I'm a little overwhelmed. I know that social media is playing a big part of it, and we are on it all the time. And I know we have a lot of children and adults that have vulnerabilities, and then they're easily manipulated on our social media. And we're probably going to talk about the protections a little later. But as a nurse at the bedside, because I don't want to ever miss that if it comes in, or even if I'm walking and traveling, how do I identify it? How do I know if somebody's being trafficked, say in my neighborhood? Like, what are the symptoms? What am I supposed to look out for?
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for that question. First and foremost, trust your gut. Something just doesn't sit well with you. Something just doesn't seem right. There's something there that is amiss. You can't put your finger on. Have that guide you that something is going on, and have that awareness. When we look specifically at the bedside, these clients, and I want to dispel one of the myths. Another myth that is surrounding human trafficking is that it's always a female victim with a male trafficker. That is not always the case. We actually have boys who are being trafficked, males who are being trafficked, as well as females who are traffickers. We have sex trafficking, labor trafficking, organ trafficking. Like I said, there are numerous forms of trafficking. Labor trafficking is far more prevalent than sex trafficking. Again, just wanted to throw that out there as another bit of information and statistic for you. However, when we are encountering it at the bedside, so let's speak the professional lens right now. We have clients that can be very demure, that are with a flat affect, not making eye contact. Now that may be cultural, so that's a cultural consideration that we have to think about. However, we also have clients on the other end of the spectrum that are very combative, that are very aggressive, that are almost to the point where they don't have that personal boundary or that personal space, because literally it has been eroded. And I'm just going to put out a trigger warning, please. I'm going to be discussing very sexually explicit content, things that are very disturbing situations. So just putting a trigger warning out there that if anyone needs to take a break or pause or to stop watching this, please, absolutely. So they are, and when I say they, these victims, survivors, they are the heinous acts, the egregious acts that they are exposed to. Literally, the trauma they are enduring is equivalent to that of war veterans. Now, the physical aspects of sex trafficking versus labor trafficking are different. However, the level of trauma is just as profound. Sex trafficking, and I just want to clarify, is not prostitution. Okay, prostitution is someone who chooses to sell their body for sex. However, I say that that is a person who chooses because they have the least choices in life. That being said, sex trafficking is literally rape. It can happen up to 20, 30 times a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. I mean, it is profound. So getting back to the presentation, we can have the very flat affect to, again, having this very aggressive, inappropriate, no personal boundary space present. There is perhaps a very domineering person who is accompanying this client. Again, can be female, can be male, can be a parent. So we have to think of familial sex trafficking because that happens as well. So there is someone who is either relaying the history, giving the details. That client, of course, developmentally appropriate, may not be in possession of their government-issued ID, a passport, driver's license, etc. Again, developmentally appropriate, of course. There can be multiple cell phones, multiple hotel keys, unexplained amounts of cash. There can be monikers and tattoos. That's very big. When we're doing our physical assessment, these individuals are branded. It is a form of possession. And so a lot of times they have these tattoos that are placed on them. They can be dollar signs. They can be crowns. They can be, again, monikers, initials, Big Daddy, something along those lines. It's very sensationalized in the media where we see ropes and chains and that kind of stuff. That's not what is happening. It is psychological manipulation. There's also barcodes that we see. Barcodes, I think, are more prevalent in Europe as opposed to here in this country. They are going to present with suicidality. They just cannot take another minute in the life. So anyone who presents with a suicide attempt, please put human trafficking on the radar. Anyone who is coming in UTIs, particularly young children, frequent UTIs, STIs, STDs, please do not stereotype or put that bias in that that's someone who is promiscuous. We do not know what exactly is happening. Ectopic pregnancies, multiple pregnancies. When we look specifically at mother-baby, women's health, we have women who are denying that they ever had any preterm or prenatal care is what I meant to say. Perhaps there's stillbirth, neonatal abstinence syndrome because mom was a substance user, and so there was that history there. Mom continued to use, again, could be that comfort-seeking measure to just endure another moment in that life, and now we have baby born with neonatal abstinence syndrome. There could be fearful interactions, or not fearful interactions, but a fear of interaction with someone, particularly law enforcement. They are told that if they call law enforcement or if the law enforcement is notified, they are going to be arrested. They will get into trouble. If it's an immigration status issue, that they will be, deported. There is so much psychological manipulation. It can be that they don't know where they are. They don't know where they live. They don't know the date or the time. Those are also some red flag findings that we say, okay, what is going on? Because they literally lose track of reality at times. They could be not necessarily forthcoming with their job, where they live, where they work. They are really under the control of someone who has accompanied them. I'm trying to think of some other ones that I could just really throw out there that are pretty important. Non-fatal strangulations. There may not necessarily be ligature marks, but perhaps someone says that they were standing 1 minute and the next thing they know that they were on the floor. That also can be a sign of trafficking. There is choking and things of that nature that are going on, particularly in sex trafficking and labor trafficking too, that that they are coercing them, threatening them with very, very violent acts. So I hope that helps.
No, that's extremely helpful. And I want to talk a little bit about how to approach these survivors with like a trauma-informed way. But before we approach that, I kind of want to also ask, how do we separate them from the person that they're with? Because some of the times when my patient comes in, I'll go to the bathroom with them and help them change and ask the questions, are you safe at home? Is there anything that can I, talk about your entire history in front of this person? But I don't feel like sometimes that's enough time to build trust. So how do I separate them so that I can have the time to build that rapport, to build that trust for the person that's accompanying them if they come to the hospital and or unit?
Great question. Absolutely great question. So one of the things that I want to say first is that these victims/survivors do not always self-identify as such. because of the psychological manipulation. There is trauma bonding that is occurring, Stockholm syndrome. That can be, again, their parents. It can be their significant other. There is this affection that has formed, this relationship, this dependency on this person. So they do not self-identify as a victim. And so therefore, that's one of the reasons why they do not disclose. When we look at someone who has been brought in and is accompanied by someone, there are different tactics that we can use. Okay. And I will speak to how to approach as well. I'm going to sort of answer both questions in the same response. So we can say that a CAT scan is needed, x-rays needed, something along those lines, that there is some diagnostic test that this client has to go for, even though they might not necessarily need it. So that is one way. And it's hospital policy. I'm sorry, you cannot come with us. This is our policy here. And so we need to take just the patient with us. So that's one. The urine was contaminated. We need to do another sample. And just as you had said about bringing that client into the bathroom. We could say that more information is needed. They didn't get everything that they needed in terms of the chart. So if you could please go outside to the waiting room or to the clerk, or however you're phrasing it, they need some more information. That's another way that we can separate. So there definitely are different methods to use and excuses to use that you can separate that client from that companion. And that is a priority. That separation needs to occur. The other thing that I really want to speak to, as nurses, I recognize that our time truly is limited. However, when we have a client that we are recognizing that there are cues or there are these findings that, again, something just isn't sitting well with us, we need to have true presence and intentional listening happening. You know, trauma-informed care and victim-centered approach, there are the 3 E's, the 4 R's, the 6 principles of trauma-informed care. I'm not going to get into those at this point, but what I will offer are these pearls of wisdom. Provide a very comfortable, non-judgmental, trusting milieu. When we speak to these clients, we need to box up, right, and put them to the side, any prejudices, biases, anything that we will have that may impact our open lines of communication and possibly cause judgment that we may not even recognize is there. We also need to meet these clients where they are. We also need to understand that their definition of certain terms may not be our definition. Perfect example, I'm always very cautious when I use the word safe. For me, safe is a place where I do not feel threatened, where I feel at ease, where I find peace, comfort. I do not have any anxiety or risk factors that are there. That to me is safe. Some of these individuals are promised safety, or I'll take care of you and keep you safe. And then they are exploited and these heinous acts occur. So we have to be very careful with our language. We also have to be very careful in the way that we word things. We don't want to use words like why, because that's almost accusatory. Why did you do that? Or what happened to you? I want to understand. Again, sometimes it's just sitting there listening, saying, I am concerned. I am here for you if there's anything that you would like to talk about. And you always want to ask permission before you do anything, even if you're asking questions. May I ask you? May I observe your arm? May I take your blood pressure? Anything, because they have been stripped, literally robbed of those choices, robbed of freedoms. And so we want to make sure that we do that. We want to make sure that we do not re-victimize them and that we do not re-traumatize them. So I hope that that answers your question.
No, it really does. And I want everybody to be respectful, and I really want to make sure that when we approach these patients, we don't re-trigger and we are cautious. And that being said, I want to talk a little bit about training. I had to renew my license, and I did have a human trafficking training session. And although I thank my state for providing that training, it was nothing compared to what I'm hearing now, what I heard in my last conference, and then what I heard at the AWHONN conference. So I think, I personally take responsibility for increasing my professional development, and I know a lot of my colleagues do too. So where do you recommend that we get training so that we have the current clinical tools, that we have the, toolkits, maybe responses, already canned responses so that we can use and practice in our everyday assessment? Where can we find that kind of training?
100%. And I thank you so much for sharing that and being so transparent. I will say that I am in alignment with you. But let me give you a little bit of a background. So we're going to dive into the literature a little bit now, so to speak. I'm going to give you some background. So there have been studies that have been conducted, retrospective studies looking at survivors and different experiences that they had during their trafficking. One of the questions asked was, during your trafficking experience, did you ever come in contact with a healthcare professional? There were 2 studies specifically that looked at this that are really golden studies at this point. Between 70 to 90% of survivors reported accessing healthcare at some point during their trafficking, with a majority of them never being identified or offered resources. That's one piece. The other piece, there are studies that have looked at level of knowledge, level of confidence in healthcare professionals who are already licensed, how they feel, what type of experiences they've had in terms of formal training. Do they know how to identify? Do they know how to respond to these clients in the healthcare setting? On average, it's been approximately 90%, some as high as 95%, reported never having formal training, with less than 10% knowing how to identify and knowing how to treat and respond to these individuals that are coming in accessing healthcare. So Tammy and I, we actually did a nationwide study here in the country looking at pre-licensure RN students in particular and their knowledge of and exposure to human trafficking content in their pre-licensure RN programs. We were able to gain access to the National Student Nurses Association, the NSNA. And so we selected, our inclusion criteria were that they were NSNA members, that they were RN students, in particular because of the RN scope of practice, because even LPNs, LVNs, as valuable as they are, any assessment findings, they still need to be taken to the RN for validation. So ultimately that RN is responsible. So current NSNA member, RN program, or if they had graduated within a year of our survey going out, because we figured that they would have some recollection. After the data were cleaned, we had representation and distribution from across the country. We were only missing Maine, Wyoming, and the District of Columbia. 91.4% reported minimal to 0 minutes being taught human trafficking content in their pre-licensure RN program. Please recognize that most of our respondents were 4th-year baccalaureate students. So it's not like they were in growth and development in their first year, okay? One of the other questions we asked was, so what is your level of confidence in identifying those red flags, clinical presentation signs and symptoms of a victim of human trafficking in the healthcare setting? it was less than 1% reporting full confidence in knowing how to do excuse me, with about 3/4 saying, I'm only halfway there, if at all. We also asked about level of confidence in knowing how to treat and respond to these clients coming in, accessing healthcare that are victims of human trafficking. Less than 5% reported full confidence in doing so, with again, approximately 3/4 saying, I'm only halfway there, if at all. We have nurses. We are literally an army. There are about 4 million of us working in this country. We are an army waiting to be deployed. Without this knowledge, because we know that they're not getting a pre-licensure. I know I didn't get a pre-licensure. We're going into this battle unarmed, and we are strategically placed to be able to identify these clients, properly identify, treat, and respond to these clients. And it's just not happening. Now, speaking to your point, Jess, only about 10 states currently mandate continuing education for healthcare professionals on anti-trafficking measures. Discipline specific, sometimes it's only an hour, sometimes it's 2 hours. I know for us in Florida as an RN, I have a 2-hour training that I need to do that's in mandate and statute, that's mandated as professional development. So every time I go to renew my license, I have to have this 2-hour training, and I could select essentially anyone. Texas is the only state that actually vets the trainings that will satisfy that continuing education requirement for healthcare professionals. So they're not getting a pre-licensure. If they are not licensed in a state that requires these mandates and that requires these trainings that they're in statute mandated, they're not getting it at all. And now when we look at these trainings, again, they're only an hour or two, discipline specific. It is a brushstroke. Just like you cannot learn pediatric advanced life support, right? PALS and ACLS in 2 hours. You cannot learn human trafficking in 2 hours. There are so many nuances, so many complexities that you really have to take a step back and see this criminal enterprise from a panoramic lens. It's not, again, the trainings that are out there. And as much as I admire, and I really do applaud the efforts that are there, they're just not sufficient. However, that being said, there are some that are out there. SOAR, which is Stop, Observe, Ask, Respond. That's something that's at the federal level. The Blue Campaign, the Department of Homeland Security has the Blue Campaign, which is their outreach awareness program. They have some trainings. But if you want comprehensive training, please come to us as Nurses United Against Human Trafficking. We have developed this very comprehensive training. It is 9 hours in length. However, it is offered asynchronous in what I like to say bite-sized piece modules. After each module, the learner will be awarded that certificate corresponding to the contact hours that they just successfully completed. We are also vetted and approved for CMEs as well as CEs for radiology technicians. We are currently under review for social work, for CEs for social workers. So that's something else that's there. There's HEAL trafficking. So there definitely are different resources out there. But please, if you want comprehensive training that when you walk away, you are going to not only be able to properly identify and know how to treat and respond to these clients, but you're going to start thinking about some of the ones that you missed.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
We'll also probably add that to our website, and then I know I'll also add it to our maternal mortality website, because that was one of the questions that we had. We had somebody wanting like a human trafficking toolkit of some sort, and it's very difficult because trafficking laws, vary from state to state.
Yes.
And I know that nurse leaders are having trouble implementing bundles or implementing kind of like a toolkit to help their staff identify and what to do if, say, you have somebody that comes in and discharges with a baby, and how do you safely get that discharge out when maybe it's, somebody that's a familial trafficking victim that has a relationship with his partner. So I have two questions. One, if you're in a scenario where you have that, where somebody's coming, they are going through the labor delivery process, they're about to be discharged, and you're trying to separate them from their trafficker, who happens to also be the person's biological. How do you do that?
Okay, so there are a lot of moving parts with that.
Okay.
One of the first things that I want to say and reiterate is that if there is ever some type of threat, that there is an incident or there is imminent danger, please, you need to contact your security team at your facility, call 911. You need to make sure that not only are you safe as the healthcare professional, the client is safe, and the other clients and other peers, your healthcare professional team, that they are safe. When we look particularly at this instance, first and foremost, I am acknowledging, and you are 100% spot on, that there can be variances at the local, state, tribal level. Okay. We need to have these policies and protocols in place so that in the event something happens or occurs that we are suspecting something, we know what to do. We know where to go, because there are times, and that's one of the obstacles, actually, it's found in the literature. One of the obstacles to reporting or escalating is that healthcare professional doesn't know what to do. The other is that they feel that they're going to be ridiculed, or that that they're going to be looked at differently. Oh, it's almost like you're calling, what's a crying wolf is the expression. Please, if you see something, you say something, right? That's the slogan. However, when we look at this scenario, there again are a lot of moving parts. How old is the mother? Is she a minor? Because it's under 18 at the federal level. Now, this may vary at the state level. I know particularly Alabama, anyone under the age of 19 is considered a minor. So is mom a minor? That may fall under mandatory reporting guidelines. There are also the opportunity to have that discussion with mom privately about whose name is going on the birth certificate, right? We have that opportunity that if they are not married, the father does not need to necessarily go on. So again, that's looking at that piece about paternal rights. Again, that opportunity to have that discussion with the mom in private and discuss what is going on, that's another opportunity. If this mother does not fall under mandatory reporting guidelines, okay, having that discussion, having it in a very non-judgmental, again, trusting milieu. If you do have concerns, please notify the team, get social work involved, follow-up care, right? Have a follow-up the day or two later with the pediatrician, say, for instance. So there definitely are ways of making sure that we are looking after this mom. If there is imminent danger, if there is anything that is falling under mandatory reporting guidelines, please, you must do that. So I hope that answers your question. It is imperative to have the legal team of the facility on board, again, creating these policies, protocols, so that they know what is in statute, what's mandated, and again, following it to the T.
So talking about the policies and protocols, is there kind of like a blanket policy and protocols that institutions can manipulate and use in their state? Like, is there a place where we can look? I know I found a couple of things here and there from different states as examples, and I also put it on the AWHONN maternal mortality site. But do you guys have like a toolkit or something as a nurse leader that I could implement on my unit?
Absolutely. So again, there are definitely resources. HEAL is one of them. We are another, as Nurses United Against Human Trafficking. We have literally the tool. We have the algorithm, which is the targeted healthcare response. We work with that healthcare facility to get these policies and protocols in place. It is a meticulous and very methodical process that needs to be followed because, again, legal team needs to be involved because there can be variances and nuances depending on that local, state, or tribal level and those laws that are in existence. There are tools that are have been validated as well. We, again, as Nurses United, we have a tool, but there is the QIIT, there is the RAFT. There are several that are out there developed by Common Spirit. Send to both of you or Bria that you can list under the resources of the podcast, that there are different tools that that healthcare professionals can access, as well as, again, coming to us and having those put in place.
Thank you. Yes, please. We would appreciate that. We want to help all the members that are asking for this information. So I'm still stuck on the stories of grooming, of you telling us how it's a psychological manipulation, because I'm a mother, I'm an aunt, I feel like I have a lot of children that I love very dearly that I want to protect. And I know our nurses are mothers and aunts and so on. And we live in a digital age. And so at this moment, I want to basically, ground everybody from their phones and take it away. But I know that's not realistic. How do we protect our children? What are things that I can do or anybody can do to protect our children?
100%. I am so glad that you brought up this point, because not only are we healthcare professionals, we may be parents, we may be older siblings, we may be aunts, uncles, grandparents. So this is not only relevant to our clinical work in our profession, but literally within our home and our loved ones. So again, going back to the creepy white van is not what happens. I believe the statistic is like less than 0.5% of abductions actually lead to trafficking. So that being said, please recognize that devices are literally the new white van that we have to be aware of. We can lock our doors, we can lock our windows, but you give a child, or anyone for that matter, a device, and you literally are letting the predator in. When we look at social media, gaming apps, I know some people it's really going to be shocking, but please hear me. Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, these are predatory sites. TikTok, they are there. And when I say they, I'm saying the predators, the traffickers, they are literally recruiting and grooming on these sites. Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox. These are innocent games that, again, parents are thinking, okay, well, my child is upstairs, he or she is playing, they're safe. If that child is on with those devices and they are able to have that interactivity with others in the online realm, there is that opportunity. Now, what I will say is, in order to protect, we need to have these open conversations with our children. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until we are in our 20s. So children act impulsively. They do not think. They do not understand the ramifications of their actions or the risks that are involved. They are impulsive. So we need to understand that it truly is not their fault. That being said, again, open lines of communication. Speaking to your children, your loved ones, your grandchildren, et cetera, whatever the scenario may be, to say, I love you. I want to protect you and keep you safe. There are certain things that we need to speak about now. And again, you can limit the amount of time that they are on them. You can limit the connectivity and who they have access to, or in terms of their connections with friends, or are they open to literally the whole web when they are on these sites. So we can put parental controls in place. We can limit who they are connecting with and who has access to them, right? I will tell you, I have 4 children. My older 2 are 19, almost 20. So, they sort of have some much more independence, of course, at this point. But my younger 2, every night, those phones come down into my room. I charge them in my room. They are not allowed to have them by themselves in their rooms, in the bathrooms, or anything like that. They know that it's a private space. I control what they have on their devices. They do not have Snapchat. They do not have Facebook. They do not have Instagram. Again, they say that I like crack the whip on the Gestapo or whatever, but so be it. They're my children and I want to protect them. And so I have put those safeguards in place. I recognize it as an uphill battle because Johnny may have it or Letitia may have it or something like that. And so, we're sort of fighting, and it's like an uphill battle, or fighting against the stream, so to speak. But we need to make sure that we have these open lines of communication, that we put those safeguards in place, limiting control, or I should say controlling access to social media, device time, where they have their devices, and things like that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it really does. And I know that it's a uphill battle, and I know that we all struggle with putting these limitations, but knowing that we're protecting our children, I'm hoping that we've given permission to go ahead and be the Gestapos of your house and stop that. I just have one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is for our members that are inspired by this, that want to be part of this crusade to protect and to be in this trafficking space or anti-trafficking space. How do you recommend that they get into it, or what kind of, do you have any advice for somebody that might be interested in being part of the fight?
100%. Off the bat, first and foremost, become educated. Become properly educated, and then share that information, because it takes every single one of us to know, to identify, to recognize, because again, it is a very hidden crime. They are psychologically manipulated. So even though they're walking around, accessing healthcare, coming into the emergency room, going on public transportation, going to school, anything like that, we need to be able to identify. So please become educated and share that information with your colleagues, with your loved ones, so that we can, as a community and as the public at large, that we can really be able to make an impact, because we can identify. There can be perhaps different organizations that there are so many wonderful organizations that are out there that are providing wraparound services, trauma-informed care, really just helping the survivor to become a thriver, to have those choices that are there, that they can literally exit the life. A lot of times they don't have education. They don't have life skills. They don't know how to get a driver's license, or any skills that we just sort of take for granted that we know. So perhaps volunteering, donating your time. If you're able to financially support some of these groups, then do that. Put together backpacks or school supplies or something for organizations that are helping with these children who have been exploited. there are different ways of getting involved. And so I hope that answers your question. But yeah, one of the first things and the utmost importance is really to become educated and to share that information with others.
Thank you. And Fran, I just want to thank you so much for your passion and everything that you're doing in this space. I'm going to end up tearing up. But we truly appreciate you coming here. We truly appreciate all the work that you're doing. And you made that patient proud. I want to say that you've come so full circle to just, for her legacy and for doing all the things you do. And so I just thank you for the privilege of being here and talking about it and teaching us and providing that education. And I'm going to pass it. I'm going to say thank you one more time, and I'm going to pass it over to Bria. I just so appreciate you so much.
No one's ever said that to me before.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah. Just want to give you that moment because I wholeheartedly agree with Jessica. And I just want to give a plug for all of the listeners out there. I want you to get your phone and I want you to save this number 1-888-373-7888.
Yeah.
This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you need to send a text, that number is 233-733. If you're online, you can go to humantraffickinghotline.org and you can get help 24 hours, 7 days a week. One of the examples that I shared with Fran is that I was in the Atlanta airport just a few days ago and I had a little bit of extra time. So I decided to walk to my concourse instead of taking the tram. And I walked past the sign and I stopped and moved out of the way so the people behind me could go past. And I came back and I took a picture of it because I kept thinking, this is an example. If you're not paying attention, then you're not paying attention. But if you are paying attention, then the signs of human trafficking are everywhere, just like Fran mentioned. And so this sign says, I'm not going on vacation. I was told I'm going to work. And it's from Delta Airlines, and it's a picture of someone's view of looking out of the window on an airplane. So you really do have to open your eyes to see that maybe someone sitting right beside you on the plane might be trafficked. Similar to that patient that brought that enlightenment for you, Fran. And so I would say by you sharing this information with us, you've turned on the light for many nurses and healthcare professionals today. And Jessica and I were so grateful for the depths of your involvement in this anti-trafficking movement, because you didn't turn away from the difficult work when you made that connection that you'd seen it. And I'm hoping that other people who are listening today will do the same thing, because your advice and your guidance is actionable. We can all begin to take very different steps right now. No one can say that they didn't know after listening to this podcast episode. We look forward. Yes, you're welcome. We also look forward to having your colleague, Tammy Tony Butler, on with us in the future.
Yes. Thank you both so much. I'm sorry that I was so moved with.
Oh, it's absolutely okay. Absolutely okay. We're so thankful for you. And in closing, we're thankful for our listeners for the privilege of your time. Whether you are just learning about human trafficking or you've already had a better understanding of this issue, please make some plans today to get more involved in the anti-trafficking movement. If you want to listen to this podcast again, share it with colleagues, with family, with friends. You can find us at awhon.org/podcasts with an S. And you can read Fran's full bio. You can see all the things that she's involved with and the work that she's doing. You can utilize all the resources that she shared today. You can also listen on your favorite streaming platforms. You can watch us on YouTube. And certainly, please leave us a review, because we want to read and know that this podcast episode was beneficial for you and that it has some impact. So thank you all again today. Stay safe and be well.
Thank you.